So this is a really weird one. I've had the same bean coffee maker from Switzerland for over 3 years, and I've had the same Deadpool coffee mug with a lid for 2.5 years in my office. I'm a slow drinker, so I keep the lid on for the coffee to keep it warm. After the lockdown hit, we moved from work to home, and I took my beloved coffee mug with me. I've been using the same mug and machine for almost 2 years without any problems. However, today when I was trying to make my morning cup of coffee, I realized that there was no way to get the mug under the nozzle and onto the tray. I tried for a few minutes from every angle and not even close. I had to hold the cup with my hand while it made my coffee. Pretty brutal glitch if you ask me, since this is my favorite mug and it had worked great for 2 years. The machine is hard plastic and metal, and I checked that every part was correctly installed and in place. The mug is a double-layered porcelain mug, so the size shouldn't vary that much. Hopefully I'll wake up tomorrow and the devs have fixed the bug in my universe. This all started a few weeks ago when my husband decided to go into his parents' attic in the garage to see if any of his old Pokemon cards were worth any money. His mom has literally kept all of his toys, so there are dozens of boxes of things that we've been going through. We found a box that clearly hadn't been opened in a long time, and it was taped up and had plastic grocery bags laid on top from a store that hasn't been in our town since the 90s, and it's full of his family's old VHS home videos. His parents documented so much of his childhood, so every night we've watched a home video after supper with his parents, and it's been really fun, as these videos are from the late 80s and early 90s. A few nights ago, my husband put a new tape in the VHS player, and the first thing that we see is my cousin's 16th birthday from 1994, and I'm in the video. His parents have no idea how they have this tape, and the weirder thing is that we have no idea who filmed this tape. I've asked all my aunts and uncles, and nobody knows what I'm talking about. The videotape also has me hunting for Easter eggs at my aunt's house, also in 1994. My parents never owned a video camera, so it's not their tape. It doesn't make any sense how my in-laws have this tape. We've been trying to come up with logical explanations, but we can't. My in-laws say the box of tapes hasn't been opened since they put it in the attic when the garage was built in 2002, which is before I even met my husband. I would have only been 11 years old when they built this garage, so it's been up there the entire time. It's not like I somehow brought this tape over and forgot about it many years ago. My mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness very suddenly. She went from working full-time as a nurse one day and unable to walk and assisted the next. It was a tragic shock for my entire family. In planning for her 24/7 care needs, my partner and I quickly decided to move us and our young children in with my parents to assist with cleaning, meals, care, and anything else they needed. Unfortunately, my mother ended up never leaving the hospital's care and died 1 month after diagnosis. We stayed living at my parents' house a few months after her passing, and it was comforting for all of us to navigate a new normal together. It's important to mention that my mom was an incredible cook and baker and did most of the meal preparation for my dad. He loved her talent in the kitchen. A few weeks after she passed, I was making dinner at my parents' home, and suddenly the entire kitchen smelled like apple pie. I actually checked the oven to see if I inadvertently left something in there. It was so intense, like a candle had been lit, but there was no explanation. There was no pie or even apples to be found anywhere. The delicious smell gave me the urge to make an apple pie, which was not something I would typically do or want to do during the work week. So I asked my partner to pick up apples, and I found a recipe that my own mother had, and I went to town. When my dad came home and discovered that there was apple pie, he became emotional and told me that he had been craving apple pie that day and almost called my mom to request one. You know when you automatically reach for the phone to call a person you were in communication with on a daily basis, and that feeling of shock and sadness when you remember the reality? And that's exactly what happened to my dad, and it gives me the chills every time I think about it. About 10 years ago, I was working in Vientiane in Laos. There was a requirement to wear motorcycle helmets, but nobody took it seriously. My helmet had a very loose strap that hung down under my chin. If I tilted my head, the helmet would just fall off. I wore it for about 5 months like that. One day, I stepped out of a cafe and sat on my motorbike, and was overcome by an overwhelming urge to tighten my helmet strap. It was like a thought that came in from the outside. The strap was knotted tight, and it took me about a full 3 minutes to untie it and fasten it safely. All the time I was asking myself, why am I doing this? With the helmet fastened tight and secured, I started my motorcycle and joined a 3-lane highway. I was in the middle lane, and to my left was a truck. I noticed the truck was slowing down to a stop, and I continued to overtake it. But a split second later, I understood why the truck had stopped. From out in front stepped 3 young boys. They were 7 or 8 years old, all holding onto a little blue bicycle, walking it across the road. I was traveling at about 40 to 45 miles per hour. I think my last thought before crashing into them was that I had to move and fast, but believe it or not, I don't remember the impact. I just remember walking up the road with a beautiful young woman that was kneeling down beside me, looking at me concerned. I again got a message from the outside, but this time it said, "Get this woman's phone number." The only thing that I could think about was to say, "Where were the boys at?" And I said it again out loud, "Where were the boys at?" As I looked around me, people had gathered and told me not to get up, but I stumbled around asking until somebody pointed up the street, and the 3 boys were pushing the bike they had on one wheel. It was completely bent in half. They looked back at me anxiously as they hurried to get away from the scene. Someone told me that they thought they killed me and that they were scared, so they were running away. I sat down on the curb, and tourists and locals gathering around me explained how far I had flown from the impact. Apart from the scrapes and concussion, I was fine. I asked for a cigarette. I never smoke, but my nerves. I looked into this woman's eyes. I don't remember what country she said she was from. The message came to my mind again. Get her number. Get her number. I don't know, perhaps I lacked the confidence at that time. I never asked. But I've always felt the whole situation was set up for me to contact this woman. Somewhere in another dimension, I know that I did, but not in this one. I've also never understood how I could hit 3 little legs at 40 miles an hour, a heavy motorcycle and me at that speed, and all 3 boys were completely unscathed. What do you guys think? Those of you that have been in this subreddit for a long time, have you ever heard anything like this? It's also not the first time I was given some sort of divine matchmaking in this country. It was almost like some benevolent entity was trying to help me out there. For the week or so that I was healing, every time I moved I felt pain, and I would still smile. It made me feel good. I don't know if that relates or if that has anything to do with the story, but I just wanted to mention that. I saw a post earlier about glitches in the Matrix, and it was a fairly new concept for me. It got me thinking about a weird coincidence that has been happening to me for as long as I can remember. So my name is Jenna, and I stand just over 6 feet tall, and I'm pretty unique looking. I have a crooked nose, olive skin, very long black hair, and blue eyes. I have a distinct beauty mark on my face as well. I have truly never seen anybody else that looks like me. I'm sure they're out there, but my height typically sets me as a much taller person relative to most women, and I stand out in a crowd. For as long as I can remember, people have mistaken my name to be Emily. Friends and family will call me Emily, only to stop right after. They can never remember why they call me Emily, and they just laugh it off. This happens across social circles and with people who have never met one another. And I don't hang out with anybody named Emily that they could be mixing me up with, nor is there a single Emily anywhere in my family. I've gone as far as asking if my parents had considered me naming me Emily, and perhaps ran the name by family and it stuck with them. But no. They were debating between Allison and Jenna, and those were the only 2 girl names they ever considered. I was at a grocery store in a different state one evening a few years ago, picking out some groceries to take back to a cabin that my husband and I were staying at. I was picking something off of a shelf when I turned and saw a cashier standing extremely close to me. "Emily, how are you?" I stared back for a second, thinking that he'd realized he'd mistaken me for somebody else. But he didn't. He kept smiling at me. "I'm sorry? I think you have me confused for somebody else." No, you don't remember me. I assured him that I didn't, and we went back and forth for a few seconds while he tried to figure out where he knew me from. Eventually, he couldn't figure it out and went back about his work. When we were leaving the store, the cashier passed us again and waved and said, "Have a good one, Emily." A little creepy, but that's beside the point. Another instance stands out at a wine tasting event with a few college friends. There were 4 of us, and all 3 of my friends were male, and we were at a winery near campus. The way that it worked was that you told the waiter your name and 4 wines that you wanted to try. They wrote down your name and selections and would bring you the wines back to taste. When the waiter was bringing our wines back, he said, "All right, Emily, here you are." And sure enough, even though I told him my name was Jenna, he handed me my wines and with a little info card, and it had the name Emily written at the top. I could probably go on for hours about stories like this, but you get the gist. I have absolutely no idea what could cause this, but figure I'd share my experiences. Who knows, maybe I look just like an Emily. This summer, me and one of my best friends went to an outdoor nighttime dance music festival with lots of DJs that occurred over a Friday and Saturday night at an airplane museum in the desert. On Saturday night, my friend didn't feel like dancing after a while, so he went off to stand by a bar like 50 feet away while I was just dancing in the crowd. Because there were so many people and it was dark out, I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of each other. Every 10 minutes or so, I went up to him to make sure that he was having fun to see if he felt like dancing again. He would always reassure me that he was having fun, and he's very chatty, so he was making friends with other people around him. About the 3rd or 4th time I went up to him, he got really angry and asked me why I kept going up to him and acting like we were friends. I was very confused and thought that he was messing with me. He told me that he didn't know me, he had never met me before, and I was creeping him out by acting like I knew him. We had been friends for over 10 years. He told me to get away from him and to stop coming up to him. I didn't know what to think at that time when he told me that. He would never, quote-unquote, joke around like that with me ever, and he seemed completely serious and upset when he told me these things. I was really freaked out and didn't know what to think. I went back into the crowd and figured we would sort things out later. About 5 minutes later, he came up to me in the crowd and said, "Let's move to a different part of the festival." I asked him, what was that last conversation all about? He didn't know what I was talking about. I relayed the conversation to him and he said that it never happened. Also, even though this was a music festival, we weren't on anything, if you know what I mean. We've talked about it a few times since, and he's still adamant that it never happened. This is one of my best friends. We have traveled extensively together, been there for each other through ups and downs, and he is one of the few people that I would trust with my life. He had never behaved this way before, nor has anything remotely similar happened since. I experienced a time reset. Alright, I'm not quite sure what to call it, but maybe somebody can help me figure out what is going on. This happened 3 nights ago. We can't recall the time, but it was past 7:30. I was hanging out in my living room with my boyfriend, and I had gotten a cup of ice cream from Sonic that was in the freezer. I was sitting down and expressed that I was cold, so he grabbed a blanket and covered me with it. As he was doing that, I leaned forward and tossed the plastic lid onto the table. We had just leaned back on the couch when we suddenly heard a loud beep. It was 3 seconds long. We both turned our heads to the right to figure out what it was. And he was sitting to the right of me. This noise has never come out of our house, and the only speaker in the house was in the opposite direction from where the sound came from. After about 4 seconds of looking at the chair, we looked at each other saying, "What was that?" I was still holding the cup of ice cream the entire time. After about 20 seconds of trying to figure out what the noise was, I looked down at the cup that was in my hand, and the lid was back on the cup. I told my boyfriend this, and he said he also saw me toss the lid onto the table. We're kind of freaked out about this, but even more weird stuff has happened lately. I was taking a long road trip with my wife and brother and his wife from Iowa to see our parents in California. I was running low on fuel, and I didn't think I had enough gas to make it to the nearest major town, so I saw on my GPS that there was a gas station about 9 miles out of the way. Upon driving there, we all got an uneasy feeling about the town, and the drive seemed to be much longer than 9 miles, as the GPS had stated. We finally got there, and it was about 8 p.m. on a Friday night, and yet it seemed like a ghost town, and most houses were dark. There was only one other car that we saw, and the gas station was closed, so we did self-serve by paying at the pump with our card. We all felt a deep unease in the pit of our stomachs and tried to pump the gas as fast as possible to get out of there. We finally do, and the drive back seems pretty normal, much more normal than it did earlier, and our trip continued as usual. Later we were telling our parents about how weird this town was and how it felt soul-sucking. I went to show them on my GPS because it showed up in the recent history search, but for some reason it was missing now. I went to the general area of the map because I remembered where it was, and there wasn't any small town at all, not even a gas station for 30 miles in all directions. My conclusion is that my brother and our wives passed into a parallel universe somehow. On the drive back to Iowa, we couldn't find the town either. Has anybody ever had a cloud glitch? It happened to me, and now I feel like it all is truly one big simulation. It kind of broke me, and I feel like I'm going crazy. It was as if though I was looking at a broken phone. The cloud just kept spazzing. It caved in on the left side in a triangle shape, and you could see the outline of what seemed like a computer image not loading properly. It kept going crazy. The worst part about this, I was with 3 friends. I yelled at them and told them to look at the cloud, but they didn't listen to me. 3 times I told them to turn around and look, and they were about 15 feet away from me, and it was as if though I was speaking to them in a different language. When they finally decided to turn around, the cloud just kind of popped back into its normal form, and they just made fun of me, calling me names and telling me that I was crazy. However, I know I'm not crazy, and I know what I saw. After that experience, despite people laughing at me and despite the ridicule, I know that we are living in some kind of a simulation. This happened to me around 2016. I had taken my kids to breakfast. I was finished eating, however my kids weren't. And then I started to daydream about those cases where the waitress comes to say, "Your bill's been paid," by a kind stranger. And then I thought to myself, wouldn't that be nice? Well, believe it or not, it happened. Somebody paid for us and left. Several hours later, I was at the grocery store and I was ready to pay for my groceries in the carts, but my debit card would not work, and I told the cashier I'd be right back. There was an ATM at the front of the store. I went to the ATM to get some cash, and when I returned, the cashier had told me that my bill had been paid by a kind stranger. I tripped out the rest of the day, and I still feel kind of trippy recounting it right now.